everybody, how's it going? This is Bruce at habowskistudio. Thanks for joining me for another video. If you're new, watching for the first time, thanks for joining. In today's video, what I'm going to be working on is a plein air piece that I started last year. I tend to just start a lot of pieces in plein air, and then when I get them home in the studio, I take a look at them and make them a painting. So let's get rolling with that. And if you like what you're seeing in the video, if you're new to the channel, I invite you to subscribe. If you do so, be sure to hit the bell notification icon to be alerted as to when I post new videos. Also, what I want to cover are some other topics that's related to a video a couple videos ago called Artist's Struggles. You can check that out if you haven't seen it. I'll try to provide a link in the description below. And there's a lot more questions and topics I want to cover. And I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm going to piece it out over time because I think there's a lot more things to talk about related to that video. So be looking for that, and hope you enjoy it. Let's get started.
Okay, here's the palette I'm going to be using today for this painting. And it's a mix of brands. If you want more information, just drop me a message, comments, and I'll fill you in. Also, I'm going to be using this cold wax medium to mix into the paint.
Now, the cold wax medium that I'm going to be using, I don't mix much into the paint. I probably do no more than a third, maybe even actually a little less, depends on what kind of texture I want. I don't want to go overboard. I'm still relatively new at using the product, and I really enjoy it for its textural aspects to creating an interesting layer to the paint film. So that's why I kind of am incorporating it, trying to over time as I work on a few paintings, doing a little here, a little there. And of course, one way you can also experiment with new mediums is to do little smallish pieces, maybe 6 by 6, and just go for it, bang it out, and see what you think of using that, tying it in with your regular painting. So just a little tip, and let's continue on.
Now here's a little pan shot of the painting before I finished it up here in the studio. Now I'm going to be working on the sky and coming forward in the painting. I've mixed in some of the cold wax medium into the paint, and I'm applying it with my Rosemary & Company dagger brushes, which are pretty useful for applying paint and getting different effects. Of course, probably everyone's familiar with the Andrew Tischler YouTube channel, but that's where I saw him using these, and I had never thought of that before, and I really enjoyed them. So I bought some for myself and like them a lot. Now I'm trying to just dance around with the new color that I mixed for the sky, and it's very close in value, just subtle differences to lay over the tone that was already there. And it's going to be a little lighter on the right hand side because of the light sources on the right hand side. And some people, when they start on a dry painting, they'll do what they call oiling out. You can look it up on YouTube or Google. It's a process of prepping the surface to receive new layers of paint. I tend not to get into that. I just kind of start doing my second layers. I haven't had any trouble with it over the years, but a lot of people, especially academic artists, will use that technique a lot. And you can see as I'm just dancing around, part of it is, what if you didn't mix up enough color? And I mentioned this in previous videos, and you ran out of that color and you didn't feel confident mixing it exactly right. By dancing around in an impressionistic manner, applying the new tones, you can interject the new tone that may be a little off. Maybe you adjust it as you go along, but it, rather than work from left to right or right to left, I move around quite a bit because of that, just in case. Plus, I think it adds a little more of an interesting aspect to the painting. So here you can see with the cold wax mixed in, the textural marks you can achieve. Okay, we're just going to take a break here from the voiceover for instructional parts of this video to allow for a few moments covering one of the topics that I discussed in the beginning. So I'll be back in just a few moments.
Okay, I want to just take a moment here while I'm painting to discuss some of the topics I was mentioning in the beginning of the video concerning a relation to the video I did before called Artist Struggles. Okay, so I want to just talk about real quick. One thing that's hard for, I think, a lot of artists, for me, I'm not going to say a lot of artists like I know everybody, but for me personally, one of the things I struggle with is trying to create art that has some importance to me and my vision and what I'm trying to say. And some of the struggle that I have is finding, making the time along with work, being a good husband, and all that sort of thing, and creating good work, and also regular everyday life sort of things, either mowing the grass, trimming hedges, all that sort of idea. And also just taking the time to live life, because one of the things that's hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes is, you admire these artists, they're in the studio and they're just like working. And I don't know, for me, I find sometimes that if I'm not out living life, experiencing life, how am I going to put that in my painting? And that's something that I struggle with. Sometimes you have ideas that are related to maybe life events going on in the world. Maybe that's your thing with creating art, and maybe it's just experiencing the outdoors or that sort of thing to bring to your art. So that's a really important idea, to make time for all of that. And in this day and age, everything's just coming in on you all the time, it seems like. And it's really, especially if you have kids. I just have cats, so I don't have to worry too much. But, all that informs your art. And sometimes it's subconscious. You don't really realize it creeps in until you see over time your body of work, and you're like, wow, that kind of is reminiscent of at that time in my life. I was going through this, and I wonder why I focused on this particular subject. Other times you may plan a series of paintings around the idea of some event in your life or in the world. And it's really an intriguing challenge, and something that is continuous no matter how you look at it. And I personally feel for myself, it's hard. Sometimes, at a certain point, I feel it's going to be hard to bring something new to your art if you're not out there in the world engaging with people and the world in general, to get fresh ideas and see how that relates to your relationship to living. So just a little idea, that topic that I was thinking about, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. So let's continue on.
Okay, you saw during that topic there that I was working on the sky, getting the tones reestablished, working on cloud formations and that sort of thing. Now I'm working on getting the trees behind the building kind of defined a bit. You want to be careful. You're not going to be able to define them too much because they're pretty far away when you look at the big picture, so to speak. And so I'm just trying to suggest some shadow and light planes and give a sense of form to the trees without going too crazy. In hindsight, after, of course in the editing, I always see more as I'm watching myself paint. It's kind of weird, but I think I am going to go back into some of those trees and change up the tone of the green, maybe make some more of a warm tone green with a little red added in, neutralize, add a little more variation in the greens. As everyone's heard, especially, greens can be very difficult. I mix my 90% of the time I mix all my own greens. I just love the challenge, and I think everyone should practice that quite a bit. Now I'm just kind of dancing around the piece, adding some tones. Sometimes what I'll do when I have, say, a certain color on the brush and I see where else I can use it around the painting, it facilitates the speed at which one can paint, especially useful if you're plein air painting. So you see in this video, there's a photo off to the left of my painting, and it's just a little quick reference of elements in the structure, different things that I might want to have added. In the end, I didn't even refer to it. It wasn't the angle of this particular painting or at the same time of day or anything like that. It was just more of a detail-oriented kind of a photo to use if I needed it. So it's actually quite interesting. I just kind of tried to take myself back to that day. And it can be hard sometimes, especially if you don't have enough information. I felt I had enough information to really bring it back for me. But it can be a little awkward waiting too long to work on plein air pieces that you bring back to the studio. And we'll be discussing why that can be an issue, leaving paintings laying around too long after you had your initial plein air session. But in just a few seconds here, we're going to cover another topic on my list of things that I think are part of a lot of artists' concerns out there. Let me know what you think. And this will be the last interruption of this video for these topics. But I think it's important to try to interject them and get some feedback so we can all have our opinion and say.
Okay, just back again with another topic that's related to artist struggles in a way. One thing that relates to what we were just talking about finding the time to balance everything in our life and to be in the studio creating art that that is honest to us, is also the fact kind of related to me it's an illusion. Like if I just spend more time in the studio, I'm going to create good artwork. And the old-fashioned adage of you really haven't learned anything unless you paint 10,000 miles of canvas and all this. But if you're not really assessing after you do each painting, especially if you're not happy with it, and actually both ways, if you think about it, if you're happy with it, find out why you're happy with it. I liked how I handled the edges, I liked the sense of light in the piece, etc. And also on the flip side, if you don't like the painting, you got to discover why, so that you can improve on the next painting. If you just continue like, if I just keep pounding it out, I'm eventually going to get how to put wet color on wet color or whatever it may be. But if you're just going through the motions and not really analyzing, I feel that's just not going to work. And I've actually been away from painting for some time before and come back to painting and have been either at the same point I left in terms of feeling confident and brushwork and all that sort of thing, and feeling happy with the results I got. I didn't feel there was a diminishing of technique or talent, whatever you want to call it. So in the meantime, though, I was still always reading about, or I would still read my art magazines, or still be influenced by things, watch motivational things on TV, YouTube. I tend to do a lot of that right now. In this period in time with over the winter here in Maine, I've been watching a lot of trying to be introspective about what's going on in my mind and trying to get all that worked out. So that's been very helpful. I love YouTube for that. So time in a studio does not equal quality of work. I think it does if you really have a focus and you're really analyzing and you're like, okay, next time I got to do this. If I want to achieve a certain result, I got to put in the work, put in the time. Certain effects just take time. And if you realize that, and maybe you're either personality-wise, you're not really a focused kind of person, and it's very hard for you to do that, then realize that and say, I can admire people that do that, but it's just not in me right now. It doesn't mean it can't be developed, but you got to decide if that's for you or not. So those kinds of things. Just another observation, and let's continue with the video.
Okay, here we are back to the painting. As you saw, as I put in the tree trunks, they will definitely need some more work, and that'll be something that I will work on at a later time once that tacks up a bit. All this time I've been putting a little of the cold wax medium in the paint to facilitate some textural interest in that sort of idea. And I just really love that stuff, and I really want to try to find a subject that I can really explore more palette knife work with. There's a lady I follow on Facebook, Jane Boyd. I think her website's janeboyd.com. She does these kind of semi-abstract sort of paintings with cold wax, and really inspired me to go order a bottle and a jar and try it out, and I'm glad I did. Even though I don't work like her necessarily visual-wise, very just so engaging to look at. Just love it. So here I am, and again, value is king to me. And what's happening here is I mix up a tone that's in between another tone and value, and so when I put that on there, I don't just start slapping it on. I strategically put it here and there and see how it looks. And I can always put more in. But once you ruin a textural element that was built from the previous layer, man, getting it back, you might be able to if you put on too much paint on your second layer, taking little terps, very carefully wiping, take your paper towel, wipe off, a little more terps, wipe off, so on. But try to be more aware as you're putting new layers on, and don't just be thinking about something else while you're doing it. Think about the painting and how it can simulate what you're trying to paint, if it's brick or whatever. Obviously, in this case, this old mill building is a bunch of bricks, but I'm not going to sit there at this viewpoint, many feet away, several hundred feet away, and get into all this. I'm not a super realist. I'm still trying to find my way in a lot of ways in terms of what I want the look of my painting to be. I love going up to painting and seeing the painter's hand, but yet I need that form and realism. So, I'm finding my way like everyone else out there, and I'm glad you're joining me on the journey, and I'd love to hear how you struggle with that. And I wouldn't call it a struggle. I enjoy it. I mean, it's not anything that scares me. I'd rather try something big that I'm not used to and fail than keep doing the same old thing. So keep that in mind, because failure is not failure. To me, it's only knowledge in disguise, if you want it to be. Or if you're very egotistical, maybe you might say, I'm not going to try that, because subconsciously you really just don't want to fail. And I try things all the time, because there's nothing more powerful than trying something you're not used to or that you've never done, and you accomplish that. Oh my God. I mean, I can't tell you how powerful a thing that is. So, but, and finding ways to deal with things going on in your life. I had a recent family member pass away, and it was really rough, because he was such a great guy, and I can either be an angry dude kind of thing, but I made the choice to just go out and make it work for me, and got a heavy bag, boxing heavy bag, so now I'm into doing, some people go to a gym and work out, which I still do occasionally, but I like to go into the garage and get on my heavy bag and reflex bag and get a little cardio workout in, and listen to some nice music. And I don't know what people listen to for music out there, but I definitely like, when I'm working out, a little hard rock, Tool, Godsmack, all that kind of stuff. Very, get you all pumped up. But enough of that. Back to the painting thing. Here I am working more on the water. Now, sometimes what happens with water, like this is near a kind of, the place here is called Hedda Falls. And there's a mini little waterfall. I don't know, each layer of ledge or whatever is probably, who knows, 15 feet. It's not like big ginormous falls, but the water at certain times of year can be moving quite fast, and when you have that aspect, I have noticed that you do not see clear reflections. Obviously, you see just a bunch of discolored water because it's being churned up and stuff. So I'm trying to pull back in my memory what that would feel like in the many times I've been at Hedda Falls at different times of seasons and so on, and trying to then couple that with artistic intentions of finding light against dark, dark against light, which I'm doing here with the dark water against that green grass to set it off more. So nice little ideas to do in your own. But you can see where I know there's reflective planes from the buildings. I'm trying to save those a bit. Again, in hindsight, after working on the painting and watching it as I'm editing it, you'll see me working on it shortly. But in the shadows on the right, there's like a little platform that I'll be trying to do the poles into the water just a bit. See up there on the top level there, but there's some little detail of the water. Gets churned up quite a bit sometimes. Okay, here we are working on the shadows. Now here's a critical thing with shadows, and I'm no science expert, but pay attention to the angle of your shadows. If you look at my shadows, and depending on how far away the planes are from one source, like say the right hand to the right of the ladder, that one angle, and to the left where my hand's covering right now, if that was a greater distance, the angle might be just a degree or two off. But you see how all the angles need to match pretty much. You want to be careful of that, especially if you're painting plein air and you're doing a subject like this and it takes you a long time and you start chasing the light and the shadows. That's where danger can happen all the time. So be careful of that. This is why you read continuously in plein air magazines and just hearing it all the time from plein air artists. Got to nail those light and shadows. I tend to look at the bigger forms first when I'm on site, find out what's going to be a problem. Every subject's going to present different issues. But first thing, I go through a checklist sort of, and the first thing I look at is like, okay, what shadows are going to change the fastest? And if some other shadows change, big deal. If they're subtle and they're not really an important actor in the movie, so to speak, then I'm not going to worry too much about those. I'm going to worry about the main character and the supporting actor, actress, and sorry to use a movie metaphor, but you get the idea. I'm going to work on those first and then go into the details. And if you really feel like you need to get something exact, then fine, you're going to have to come back for a second session in a plein air piece. But I think it's important to really put yourself against the clock, so to speak, and really test your metal. Kind of really, it's almost like you're being competitive and running a race or sports in school, or if you're training in the gym like an MMA fighter. It's like, you're not always going to have ideal situations going on. So this is, again, I've mentioned before in previous videos, I see my plein air work as like exercise for the studio. And sometimes it might go through a phase where they're really, I'm spending a lot of time doing plein air work, and other times where I'm doing more studio work. I like the balance, and I'm not that die-hard sort of person that's like, oh, plein air is this. The camps that they have out there. I'm not that kind of person. So here is where I love this dagger brush. Doing the grass here was so much fun. You think it's closest to me. I'm going to see tons of detail, which, the eye, when you're plein air painting, the eye's amazing. It sees everything. It's really the job of the artist to pick and choose what you want to amplify or play down to support the idea in your painting. And I usually find that if you can get 3 values in there, your light, your dark, your mid-tone, and see what it looks like. And if, like for me, if I was painting this, I was on a time constraint, the grass, like it pretty much is done that way. This is middle tone, dark tone, light tone. Because then when I can just pop that in real quick on site, I can focus on the more important details, like in the mill building, the angles of perspective, and not get caught up. It gives me enough information to nuance it more if I want in the studio. So every subject's going to be a little different, but there are, I would say, if I had to guess over my experience, 70% of the time you can follow the same systematic routine to get a subject down and be all right, kind of ending up with a pretty decent result. And that 30% is going to be depending on what you choose to, bite off and choose, so to speak. And here I'm just trying to accent a little bit along the edge of a shadow with a little, one way I like to do that is with a little more saturation of the color. Don't dull it down too much. I'm more of a naturalistic painter, and I use that to my advantage to play down certain parts of the painting by graying them down with complements, or I like to actually use a lot of earthy tones. Umber's my favorite, plays well with a lot of colors. But then when you put in those more chromatically strong colors, boom, really gives you some focal points dancing around the painting, so something to think about. And again, to reiterate, all this time I have been mixing a little bit of cold wax into my paint mixtures as I've been going along. You want to be careful not to have one part of the painting be very textural, of course, and other parts be all smoothed out and blended together. You want to have continuity in your painting. So you got to pick and choose kind of your battles. But there can also be a downside that someone gets caught up in the gimmicky aspect of a medium. Oh, look, it provides so much texture, and then someone trying to look at the painting, in my opinion, they can't get past the gimmicky aspect of the technique to really appreciate the subject. There's a really fine balance, and I think each artist is just going to know it when they find it for themselves. I'm not the one to tell someone this is just the way I paint and approach my subjects. We all need to find our own way in our own journey, so it's important to explore all the options for you to see where you might need to go with your art. So I was pretty happy with how the grass turned out. I really enjoy using those dagger brushes, and I suggest you order some. Doesn't have to be from Rosemary & Company. Maybe you can find them in other brands, but they're very useful for different techniques, and I enjoy them quite a bit. Just using some light to the side to highlight some of the texture here as I get close.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to end the video here. I think it came out pretty good. I'm going to be working on this tree just a little bit more. I like the idea of a vertical element on the left to balance out the smokestack on the right. So I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you were new watching for the first time, watching my channel, thanks for joining, and I invite you to subscribe. If you do, click that bell notification icon. It'll let you know when I post new videos. And everybody can find me on Facebook at habowskistudio and on Instagram at habowskistudio. So until the next video, see you later.